particularly when it comes to community. And this is something that I've been talking with Ken about a bunch in recent months on the Ken Show. This has been one of, I think, really negative consequences of these last 40 years of neoliberalism, is that it has replaced genuine lived communities with sort of these artificial, substitute gratification communities that we find on Facebook and, online forums, things like that. I think that the technology is actually finally catching up in a certain kind of sense that's allowing us to create more embodied communities, digital communities, such as this show where we can actually look each other in the eye and get, real sort of sensory feedback in the moment. That's a big plus. And I think that helps, warm these communities again. But that's been a real problem is we've sort of overcompensated in the last 40 years. And I think community itself has sort of been caught in the crossfire. What do you think, Rob?
Yeah, no, it's been a combination of a left-right hook. The left hook has been alienation, and the alienation of kind of a flat modern worldview that is kind of post God and post Amber, right? It's post ethnocentric or group centric as kind of something that we find that we dedicate ourselves to deep from within our self-identity, because we're in this fast-moving, quite modern world, and that's the left hook. And the right hook, of course, is the economic piece. What you say, that all of social life has been given a kind of a price tag, and Michael Sandel does a great job of addressing this in What Money Can't Buy, when he says that we are how does he say it? We've become a market-based society fundamentally, rather than a society with a market. We've become a market-based society where any aspect of the life world, meaning the left-hand quadrants, can be thought through the lens of, as an economic good. And that's a very, very deep problem of orange. It's a pathological version of the orange worldview that green, of course, is responding to quite aggressively at the leading edge, with all kinds of new, structures and pushes and what have you, some skillfully and some very much not.
Yeah, it's beautifully said. And I think we're starting to see the toll that this takes, particularly on young men. I mean, this is something that we discuss often, is how, in a neoliberal system, a man tends to extract his sense of value. He's basically only left with his extrinsic value. I am as valuable as the value I can create for other people. And I think what is missing largely, I mean, there's all sorts of reasons why this is missing, but it's largely due to the diminishment of the private sphere throughout the 20th century. Men don't have a source of intrinsic value.
Yeah.
And so when they lose their job, they lose their extrinsic value, and that edges them closer to really dramatic decisions like suicide. Or when they lose their spouse, either through divorce or death, and they actually lose sort of their only kind of unspoken source of intrinsic value, same thing happens. And I think that the diminishing of community is definitely a major factor here. So all of this, it's not just kind of taking place out there. This isn't just all market stuff. This is all landing for us in our interiors, oftentimes in really, really profound and painful ways. And it's part of the challenge that we're faced with right now.
No doubt.
Well, T, thank you for the questions, man.
Okay.
Let me go over to our Q&A. We have a few Q&A questions. So Baljit, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'm sorry if I'm not. Other habits of dealing only with surfaces is the tendency to look at only objective indicators, leaving out the qualitative, subjective aspect of impact and web of life. Well, I think that's right. And I think that's kind of what we're speaking to right now is, oh, you know what? I just kicked Rob off and not T. Hang on a sec. Rob, you back?
I'm back.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries.
Hosting glitch.
Yep.
So thanks for that comment, Belgi. That is, I think, what we're trying to address right now, is that this isn't just all taking place sort of out there in the exteriors, but it's personal. And, Ryan Oakey and I just did a show, Rob, Inhabit Your Politics. And this was sort of the fundamental point that we're trying to make, is that all politics are personal. I mean, all of this lands in some way. And if you again, if you really sort of take inventory of your life, you're going to find that place in your life where you have real skin in the game, where this is creating real friction and real pain. And the opportunity there is that this creates real, sort of galvanizes our political will in a certain kind of sense and makes us want to engage that much more. But, I think the problem that we're confronted with right now amidst all of this, kind of cultural polarization that we're seeing is that it's one thing to say that all politics are personal. It's another to say, do we have to take it so damn personally?
Yeah.
And that's, in a lot of ways, what's kind of, creating this massive and widening wedge between us is that we take this shit so personally.
I think that I'll speak to the U.S. because I'm a U.S. citizen. So I can speak to it from my own kind of subjective point of view as well. I think that we take it really personally in this election in particular. Like, I think there's always people who want to take every election seriously and personally.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the reason why so many people are taking this one personally is because what they identify as their fundamental core values as this identity American are now at stake.
Mm-hmm.
In a very, very deep and personal way. Like, it's impossible to understand ourselves, literally to understand who we are supposed to be in the world, if we come to accept the idea that we are a nation without a rule of law.
Right.
Like, the two ideas are so fundamentally incompatible that it does in fact represent a kind of death. It represents a kind of murder of who we are. And I think for a lot of people who might interpret it that way, and I certainly am one of them, it's an impossible situation. Like, you have no choice but to take it personally, because you just happen to be in this historical moment where you're thrust into taking it personally, and the stakes are so high. Now, could you say, well, you're over embellishing the consequences, and you're not reading the situation properly, and
Well, the problem is you're not unfolding. I think is one of the major challenges that comes out of this. People stop unfolding.
Yeah. And my argument has been, because I've gone through this, is I can argue the other side intellectually, actually,
mm-hmm.
as well as the other side can. Like,
right.
I get it, and I understand it at a pretty deep level. That said, at some point in the cosmos, some things are just a fight.
Right.
Like, some things are actually just a battle. Some things are just a war, and you just have to fight them.
Mm.
Now, it is my contention that this is that kind of situation. So for me, the unfoldment is that there's no choice here. This is simply a war for power, and it has to be won, full stop. Now, I think we lose ourselves if we were to say, well, that then justifies fraud, collusion, lying, theft, like all kinds of things. The moment you violate your own core values, you have done just as much damage to yourself as anyone from the outside could have done. And that right there is the gotcha. That right there is the tricky part, because it goes to, like, well, how far do you go? And the answer is, well, you have to stay within the lines you've already drawn. And of course, that's where the self-contradictions and self-inconsistencies pop up real fast.
Yep. Which means that, one of our two major political parties basically has to fight the war with one arm tied behind their back.
They have to be smart.
Yep, they do.
They gotta be smart.
That's right.